Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is James Baz, and I'm the head of retail technology at Shape Immersive. I'll be your host for this afternoon, and we're really excited to bring this panel to you. It's called How AR Will Transform Retail Over the Next Decade, and it's part of a series that we've started called Shape the Future, where we bring leaders in AR and VR industry together with leading retail brands and enterprises who are using this technology to push their organizations and their industry forward. We couldn't do it without the support of our partners. Thank you, Accenture Interactive, to Shape Immersive, as well as the Vancouver VR AR Association. This event was organized by Dan Berger and Alex Chuang, who've worked tirelessly over the last decade to help support the spatial computing industry. And they have helped build Vancouver into a #2 VR AR hub on the planet. So thank you, Dan and Alex, for bringing us all here today. To Accenture Interactive, Accenture XR is a strategic initiative of Accenture Interactive, and it is a human-centered design process that brings industry knowledge and expertise to help Global 2000 companies imagine, create, and deliver impactful XR experiences to unlock new business value. Shape Immersive, we are an innovation agency that partners with brands and enterprises to deliver amazing experiences. We're a group of 3D artists, designers, and product engineers. And together, we are pushing forward the bounds of 3D commerce as well as retail brand experiences. And to the Vancouver VR AR Association, which has connected over 250 member companies. The mission is to make Vancouver a leading hub for growing and scaling XR companies. We also want to take a look at what retail is going through at the moment. We have about a 30-minute panel, which is going to be followed by 10 or 15 minutes of QA. So please submit your questions. And what we're going to explore is how AR is impacting retail today. And originally, this panel was scheduled for South by Southwest this year in Austin. And what we have gone through over the last 45 days has pushed retail and its digital transformation forward by about 10 years. With it comes what some are seeing as the end of the department store. We're seeing the destruction of Class A and Class B malls across America. And we're really looking to AR to bridge that gap between the physical and the digital. Can we create virtual tactile with technologies like augmented reality? And when we look at AR today, it is actually being used across the retail enterprise. It's being used for product planning. It's being used for design, for engineering, manufacturing, to marketing, e-commerce, and all the way to the end to the post-purchase consumer experience. So we're at this unbelievable juncture where AR is really set to help usher retail into its new chapter. And with that, we have our amazing panel. The moderator today is Amy Peck, who's the Senior Director of Enterprise Content at HTC Vive Studios. She will be joined by Rafael Camara, who's the Global Head of Innovation and Strategy at Accenture Extended Reality. We have Tony Parisi, who is head of AR/VR ad innovation at Unity Technologies, and also is one of the OGs that help build a lot of the core technology that drives XR experiences today, as well as Elliot Round, who's a co-founder and CTO of MXR, who are producing the retail industry's top AR work today. So I'm hoping that you enjoy the panel, and Amy, please take it away.
That's a great start to sort of set the stage. So you talked about a number of ways that brands are looking at it. One is sort of on the process side and understanding their consumers better, merchandising. But then the other side is the user journey, which I think is sort of a really interesting part. So maybe we could start with the user journey side and what that really looks like. And Tony, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad we start there. That's definitely where I'm focused. So you think about how people will discover new products, either through advertising or through, in other words, places they're already viewing or interacting, whether it's in-game, like in a Unity game, in a social application, whether they're on YouTube. You may have seen this now. You can do makeup try-ons on YouTube. So there's a focus around makeup and beauty that Google is leaning into. So, basically going where the audience is where brand wants to start this journey, I would say. or a search result. And we've also seen Google offering up search results now that are 3D objects that you can actually then go into augmented reality from by hitting a button. So there are multiple ways that a consumer can discover this stuff. And I mean, this is just the beginning. Those are the ones that were the obvious ones I think everyone thought of based on what their business was. In our case, it's an ad you see in a game. So you can see a video ad or you can see an interactive ad, and with the touch of a button, you can bring that thing into augmented reality. And that's how we do it. But it could be something like, I send you a text message, and that's how you discover something in AR, if it's easy enough to share. Or you see it in a tweet or something on your social feed. So it could be, sort of fully integrated into the experience you're seeing because someone has shared it, or it could be, link based. So there, because we have an interconnected world and a web, there are so many different possibilities for how people can discover, but that user journey usually starts with something like that. I'm either intentionally looking for something, or someone has shared something with me, or I am in the midst of some daily activity digitally wherein I discover that piece of content. So that's where it all starts.
So how do you see, influencers, and I'm thinking of influencers not as sort of, this new marketing paradigm and, a million viewers on YouTube. I'm thinking about where sort of everyone is an influencer. You're talking about the sharing and the texting. What are some of the behaviors that we're seeing around that? And I'd love actually to hear your, all of your opinions on that, because we're augmenting the existing behaviors on social in this new environment. I'd love to sort of hear where you see all that going. Who wants to start? Rafaela.
Well, I think I'll take it a little bit wider than that, if you don't mind, instead of going straight to influencers immediately. Just to riff off of what Tony was saying, we've also been thinking a lot about the consumer journey. The typical digital consumer journey thus far has gone from web to mobile. And yes, you can create and you can extend the relationship that you create in the store through web, and then from there you take them to mobile, and then you might bring them back to the store. But we have additional ways of connecting now, that it could be AR mobile, really could even be web AR, but it could be VR, but it could also be mixed reality glasses, which I think everyone here believes is kind of like the future of how consumers are going to be dealing with things on a day-to-day perspective. So what we're trying to do is make sure, if you look at different industries and you look at the typical journey that a consumer might do, that could be different if you want to buy a pair of jeans, or for example, we did an example with the hoteling industry, and how do you go and you choose an event room if you want to have a wedding somewhere. How can you extend that journey, and how can you then use the different mediums that we have to give an additional part of that experience and get them closer to your brand, gather that specific lead, be able to connect with them, and possibly even sell to them at the end. So it could be an influencer, but it could also be a regular customer that could go through this specific journey. Just to give an example, what we did, for example, we did something called the XR Event Planner. We did it with IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group, and Qualcomm. What we did with that was basically we took a journey that currently exists. If you want to go and choose an event room, you typically have to travel there, you have to see it, you might be in a completely different nation or state. Even when you get to the event room, you cannot visualize what it might look like with tables set in a certain way. So we created a solution that really lets you configure that space, experience it in 3D, lets you collaborate with the hotel sales people remotely in real time, and lets you do it on any platform that might work best for you. That could be AR mobile, it could be glasses if you want to have your hands free but still be in a 3D environment, or it could be VR if you want to get to a specific level of immersion and a one-to-one relationship. And it actually worked really well. We had incredible results from the focus group that we did with the hotel people, which leads us to believe that it could increase revenue by 8%. In an industry that accounts for $330 billion per year in the US alone.
So those are amazing numbers, and it's not hard to extrapolate from here how retailers might collaborate, designing stores and merchandising in a similar environment.
Yeah, it's this idea of being able to try on, configure make what I'm trying to get mine, individualize it, and explain it to the person who's supposed to sell, to the brand that's supposed to sell it to me at the same time, in complete freedom, depending on how much I want to be immersed with that specific product or experience.
Great. And Elliot, we haven't heard from you on the user journey question, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So following on from what Tony was saying, where you're going to start seeing a lot of, or you at least already are, you're seeing a lot of interactions between websites, emails, Twitter, that navigate you towards an AR experience. We're also starting to see a lot of real world that then brings you to an augmented reality experience. And that's done through the aid of machine learning. So with a few companies, and I believe Nike are doing this at the moment, you're able to take a picture of a trainer that you might see on someone in the street or on a billboard or even in the store, and it is able to detect what that trainer is, and then you can see that trainer on your foot. So it ends up taking this kind of normal clunky way of shopping online where it's very search and text based, and it brings you back towards a much more natural way of shopping. If you could, James, just go back to the previous video. So with AR at the moment, we're seeing a lot of it being used with activations for products, as opposed to seeing an entire catalog. And I think the reason for this is mostly due to the speed at which we can create 3D assets. This is great. It allows us to see products, up close and personal. And what you're seeing at the moment is a piece we did for Mulberry last year. So the handbag, the iris, and they wanted to show off at some of their events around the globe. They had these little beer mats, and customers at the event could see the handbag in the palm of their hand, change the colors and stuff. Now, it's not something that we can roll out across the world yet, because you have to, create these 3D assets en masse. But if you look at companies like Ikea, they're sort of fitting perfectly into this niche, because they're not trying to sell 3D assets visually, they're trying to sell it as a function. So if I want to see how big a chair, fits in my living room, well, I don't really care too much about how that looks, but I want to see if it fits, and that's a perfect use case of augmented reality.
And not only, but Amy, going back to your question, 3D assets are incredibly important, even if you're trying to hit influencers or social media or any form of advertising that might be AR based. So I think every company is trying to create 3D assets as much as possible and figure out what is that pipeline. How can you reuse them? Sorry, Tony.
No, it's okay. I want to react to everything everyone's been saying. And I kind of feel like, in a sense, Amy, we buried the lead here. So there's there's so many use cases. Raphael kind of scoped them out across the industry for retail. But to me, what excites me the most is that what Elliot was just showing us, which is really that someday we're going to shop for everything in 3D. Now, as Elliot pointed out, we're not there yet. Mostly because of issues around scaling up content creation. I think that's the game we're going to see in the next couple of years, is the technology platforms, the tool sets, the service providers who are able to rapidly create digital twins of every object and every catalog on the planet, the way we have digital photography of everything now. So first and foremost, I believe that is the game. We're going to solve all these wonderful little distribution things. Google can show great makeup try-ons or search results, but search result of one shoe that you can spin around is interesting, but it gets really interesting when you can do that with everything. When you can do what Elliot was saying, which is actually then use the computer vision aspects of AR to recognize something in the real world and say, give me something like that. That is also incredibly amazing. So, to me, that is the real challenge ahead of us. And not to mention what Raphael was talking about and hinting at about the time we're in now, when it'd be much better if we could do a lot more things remotely. And that's not just the shopping, but the planning and everything else. So this is a big onion we got to peel back here in the next half an hour-ish, Amy. But it kind of cuts across all those use cases, the production techniques, and the discovery. And from my point of view, it's kind of one of the most exciting things we could be doing right now. Elliot, can you tell us what I'm sorry, Amy, I'm taking over asking questions, but it just intrigued me. It intrigued me. So what did you specifically do? Was that one of your projects that you were showing that video of there?
So, James, would you be able to get up the Mulberry, the third video for me, please? So what we've been working on MXR is a universal capture system. So I come from a background in the film industry, and then I moved into virtual reality. And coming from film, you've got such a high barrier for realism. And then entering into the VR world, everything looks a little bit CG and kind of fake. And you quickly start seeing that although this industry has so much potential, the biggest crux and the biggest bottleneck is how quickly can you make 3D content to place into this world. And you quickly start realizing that there's three issues we need to solve here. It's how quickly you can create said asset, it's the quality of the asset, and it's the cost of the asset. And often you only kind of manage to hit two of those, if not just one of those. And what you're seeing here is, this is one of our scans. We've generated an automatic system where we can capture a 3D object, but also we're able to measure all of the material properties that go into that object. So in the real world, objects react to light, they reflect light, they scatter light, and light even sometimes goes through the object. And this is all key to realism. If you don't have these properties, then everything looks a little bit kind of CGI and plastic. And the added benefit of this is when it comes to shopping, we don't always have to actually reach out and touch something to know what it feels like. You can look at a picture of a jacket and know what the suede feels like just because of the way it's reacting to lighting. So it's incredibly important that not only can we scale the creation of 3D assets, but we're actually able to make them at such a level that when you see an object and when you get that 3D object in the real life, there's little to no disparity. So you're buying what you get. Otherwise, you're going to create a kind of false sense of trust where you'll see an object in AR, you'll purchase it, and it'll arrive and it'll be nothing, how you thought. Whereas if it's identical, then you've built up a huge sense of trust. And that's something that's currently sort of missing with a lot of internet shopping at the moment. Some garments might be shot with very flat lighting, and the problem with that is you don't know what it's made out of.
Yeah.
That's
So
great. I would argue that
this,
actually the fourth piece.
Go ahead, Amy.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to say that just
No, I
the
was
fourth
just going to
piece.
follow up. I'm waiting on you, Amy, again.
No, you go.
All right. No, so Elliot, you're raising the key production issues, but the thing is, I also think it's important for our folks attending here to understand that it's not complete research right now. These are being put into practice. You can actually use today's technologies, phones, game engine tech, web tech, to pretty faithfully represent these things now. So the issue is not the ability to do it, it's the ability to create the content at scale at this point. So I really wanted to underscore that little point, because while what Elliot's doing is a lot of breakthrough work on making this a practical thing at scale, it's doable today. And we're seeing lots of examples of really good photorealistic rendered products that you can interact with right now that work on the lowest end phones. So that's what's key. I want to make sure people understand that we're not painting a picture of a 3 years from now future in terms of feasibility. It really is now. The game is, how do we take this into production? Sorry, Amy, I just wanted to make sure people were clear on that.
No, I think that's a great point, and it also does touch on what the last piece, which is sort of the sort of fourth piece of this 3D asset is, and it's something that we really need to crack is then having this 3D asset library that can move across experiences for both AR and VR, and how do we track those? And that's going to be just sort of an important practical component. Which I'd like to kind of lead that into some of the back end nuances, understanding consumer behavior and data. That was something that you also opened up in the beginning, Raphael, and I think it's a really, really important piece of this, because we don't really know yet how consumers broadly are going to start behaving in this digital landscape. So what are some of the ways that Accenture is looking at measuring these behaviors, A, helping lead behaviors, but then B, helping understand where we might go and sort of letting the consumer lead us to what they want to see in these environments?
Happy to discuss that. If you don't mind, just to add a little bit to what Tony was saying before and what Elliot was saying, just one more second. Yes, the being able to show those 3D assets with the correct lighting and exactly as they are is something that's not just useful for consumers, but even the brands themselves want to really be able to tell what their product is going to look like. They spend a lot of time during product planning and packaging and everything else.
Okay.
One thing to keep in consideration is that I think consumers will want to do a little bit more than just seeing that asset in 3D. They will want to be able to modify it, configure it, or make it their own And obviously, if you think about the hotel thing that we were doing, it's easier to understand that. But I think even a bag or something else, you might want to change it. That will require us to think about how do I create assets in a way that they can be configurable, which is a little bit different from just capturing it as is. And it is something that we're all trying to solve, and we all want, because we all understand what how that modifies the relationship with something completely. Because you cannot do it you cannot even do it in the real store. It's difficult to do in any form of environment, real or digital. This way we could, if we find a way to create those assets in a simple way. Sorry, I had to say that because I know it's come up a lot.
Good.
As far as data is concerned, I think, maybe a year and a half ago, we started, we were talking to Qualcomm, it's a big partner of ours, and they were embedding eye tracking in untethered VR headsets. And we were looking at the variety of different industries that we work with, and it was obvious that when you're talking about retail, CPG, physical stores, there is a need to understand. There is research that goes on all the time. We call it merchandising, and that is the art of figuring out where you should place products, what should be the flow of a store, what package works better than another. And there are different ways of doing it, and all the different ways of doing it are very, they're not cost effective, they're not time effective. It takes a long time, it takes a lot of money. You have to travel, you have to make people travel back and forth. It just takes a long time. So we started using VR with eye tracking, and we did it something with Kellogg's. We call it the VR merchandising project, where we basically recreated one specific research test, and we did it in VR with eye tracking. We recreated the store. We let people shop through it just like they normally would. They can pick up the products, they can put them down. But what we added was detailed eye tracking, not just a heat map, but what were they doing when they were picking up the product, were they turning it, when they're putting it back down, what did they look at before. That led to a very different merchandising conclusion for us that was an 18% lift from a total brand sales perspective. All this to say, sometimes we think of AR and VR as disjointed from the physical, but they are not. They can actually be an extension. They can actually help you do things better in the physical world. Certain things like behavior that you might not even, I myself don't know what I'm looking at and why I'm looking at something first or second. But doing it this way lets everyone, including consumers, hopefully, at the end of the day, get an individualized result or experience and lift everyone's desires from a brand side and from a consumer side.
That's great. And Tony, we've seen kind of an evolution in the way, marketers and advertising have leveraged VR. I think, when we first saw VR for marketing, we had some very cool experiences, but it wasn't necessarily something that would, engender loyalty or where a consumer could then draw a line back to the brand. I mean, it had the wow factor, but we've evolved a lot, and you've been thinking about this nonstop for the past couple of years. So what is that next evolution of marketing and advertising?
So yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, the excitement around VR got a lot of people building a lot of great stuff that had questionable return on investment, in a straight dollar sense. Though, for people who did the first few experiments, it was probably some good PR value for being out and being first, being innovative. That's great. But at some point, subsequent to that, the, inevitable ROI discussions had to happen. How can we best take advantage of this technology to either really more deeply and in a more lasting way engage a customer, a partner, someone that we have mutual value with, or how do we reach more? Right? It's usually some calculus between those. And so that's why I've spent personally the last couple of years looking more at the more lightweight immersive experiences that you can deliver to everyone on a phone, because there's billions of those phones out there, and they've gotten better and better. The last couple of generations of phones can do really great augmented reality. And so what we and Unity's brand advertising team have been doing in the last couple of years and engaging with advertisers and retailers directly with brands, is trying to understand the right mix. Because there are some experiences that are really way better in a mixed reality headset like a HoloLens or Magic Leap, or, you know, a full Oculus, fully immersive set like an Oculus or Vive. But again, the reach of those is limited. And what we've been doing up until you know, the elephant in the room now, the pandemic we're all dealing with right now, we've been bridging that gap by having a lot of location-based VR experiences happening at places where you could still reach consumers with footfalls, be they in malls or at pop-up activations, and then connecting up some subset of that experience to something you could run in augmented reality, either through an app or, you know, through something like Unity's ad network or on the web. So, you know, you really have to sort of mix and match these, and it's very much, there's no one size fits all strategy either. You have to mix and match these things. So clearly from the straight ROI perspective, so many advertisers care about, again, serendipitous discovery, which I brought up in the beginning when you asked me, as in go where the audience is, and just reach and scale. You know, whatever it is, however they discover it, I need to reach lots of them. So those are always in the calculation, and right now more than ever, where we're at home a lot, or you know, working from remote, we need to think about how we can reach people right now. We know we will someday get out the other end of the pandemic crisis, but we also, I think probably most people believe some changes that are being made right now are going to be somewhat permanent. So we always have to factor these things in. So when it comes to VR, I think the hope is there will be more and more VR in the home to bridge that gap, as well as just increasing capabilities on mobile devices. And heck, I mean, I was thinking about this when we started chatting on Zoom. We've probably all now played with the Snap camera on our desktop. The recent update broke on Zoom with my MacBook, but for a day or two there, I had Snap lenses on my face in my Zoom conversation. So are these video conferencing platforms now going to become a marketing channel? Are we going to have more in-home technologies? Are people going to start buying more cameras, more webcams, newer versions of Azure Connect or whatever's out there for that, bringing more Vives into the home? Did those become marketing channels in this new world? We got to take the whole thing in holistically. The reason I kind of range between all of them is Unity's in this unique position because we're a software platform for doing it all. We're all about real-time 3D content. We power that with our tools. And that content, it may not run identically in a Vive to a mobile, you know, iPhone, but you can repurpose quite a bit of that content, or you can create, again, an integrated experience that spans those.
All right, we're going to open up Q&A soon. So if you were in the audience and you do have some questions, be prepared to start typing those in quickly. And I think I'd just like to talk a little bit about, you know, that next evolution of retail environments. I mean, more and more malls are becoming entertainment centers. Stores are, you know, bringing in very sort of creative ways to engage consumers. And where does, AR in particular really fit into this? And how do you see this evolution occurring?
I think we're going to start seeing a lot more. So augmented reality doesn't necessarily have to be something on your phone or on a screen. It can also be, you know, light field displays. And if you're unfamiliar with these, I recommend that everyone goes and checks out Looking Glass Factory. So these are displays where a 3D object can almost come out of the screen, and you can have multiple users looking at it. And it's completely 3D, perspective based, and you don't have to wear glasses. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of these because it's very frictionless augmented reality, and it allows you to reach out and actually touch products. So for things like Nike ID, where you want to customize a product long before it's even going to be in your hands, you can see it on one of these displays, you can touch it, you can customize it, grab it. We've got a little demo video here. You can really get a feel for how this object's going to be long before you purchase it. You can even, you know, put your hand in front of it, hold it, and take a photograph. We're definitely going to move, I think, more into this first than the phone-based stuff in stores, purely because of the frictionless nature of it. And also, if we can get them big enough, you know, walk-in wardrobes, you know, where you can see the clothing on yourself in like a mirror, rather than just a 2D plane.
I would say that I think it's going to be a completely different world in 2 years and 3 years. I think all that we're doing right now in mobile AR or even web AR and partly in VR is the beginning, and it's teaching us really what to do from a front-end perspective, and how to deal with consumers and how to talk to them, what they're responding to, but also from a back-end perspective, as we're talking about, how do we produce those assets? How do we create these things? How do we make it efficient? Because if it takes too long or it's too costly, then you're not going to be able to do it in mass. And really, we're going to get to a point where basically there is an extension of the physical in the home or wherever we are, when the mixed reality glasses are going to be more popular for everyone. We all believe the year is 2023 when that is going to be. That there are already some glasses out there right now. We even used some of them. We use the in-real glasses for some stuff. People are responding really well to them. They like the fact that they can have this added world in front of them that looks very crisp and very 3D-like. They are willing to give up a little bit of the immersion that VR gives you for an AR experience that still lets you be with everyone else, and it's a light and bright, and you can talk to other people. I think that will really change things, and I don't think that there will be any company that will be able to stay away from offering the ability to try on a product, whatever that means, from trying something on to being in that situation to whatever else it is. I think it will be almost mandatory for everyone. So we should work on it now and figure out the kinks.
Can I build on that for a second? I love everything Raffaella just said, Amy, and please don't make me put $1 in the 5G jar, but it reminds me we should probably talk about 5G just for a second, at least, if we're future casting 3 to 5 years into the future, which is where Raffaella is taking us. Then by then we will have a fairly significant rollout of new network technology that can just deliver even more 3D content faster. And I think we'll start to have that feeling we had when we hit that tipping point where everyone was live casting video on Facebook, and now everyone's streaming. Wasn't possible before 4G. 10 years ago, everyone had said it's going to happen, or 8 years ago, it's going to happen. And we were like, yeah, sure, it will happen, but it really happened. I think the same thing's going to happen where when we have that next generation of faster network and edge computing and all the fancy tech that goes with that, we're going to have all the augmented reality we can imagine, and probably delivered in these glasses like Raffaella was talking about as well. So we're going to ratchet up in terms of the content and the user experience as well in that same period of time. It's going to be very high production value, highly interactive, fast to load. That's going to be very exciting next few years.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cloud rendering, be able to really deliver experiences at scale, and I think also we're all waiting for the real magic wayfarers, so this can be a truly seamless experience. But I really like Elliot's point that it doesn't always have to be through mobile. It won't necessarily have to be through glasses. And there, even projection mapping is a form of AR, and we can start to really think of creative ways to add sort of a digital overlay into real life. So I'd like to go to some of the questions. We have some good ones. Feel free to keep, and there's a little comment box down in Q&A, but we may not be able to get to all of them. But I like this first question, which is, I think, very much in Elliot's wheelhouse, just for getting assets into AR, VR. Can you walk through that, the process, and what is the best solution for high quality and scalable asset creation?
There's a few solutions at the moment, and we're also trying to develop our own. So the ones kind of on the market, you've got photogrammetry, and this can be done on a mobile phone. And what this will allow you to do is you have to walk around an object, take a bunch of photographs, and it will create a 3D model. Sometimes you may have to do a thing called retopology, and what that will do is it will reduce the 3D mesh to something a little cleaner and more streamable on a phone. The issue with this method, though, is it will not give you any material information of the object. So it will kind of light the same way, whichever perspective you place it, but it will give you a way to put it into an AR environment. The other approach, of course, is you just model it by hand. This is probably going to give you the best results. And it can create assets that are a little bit too perfect, which often fall into what we like to call the uncanny valley. What we're trying to develop is a sort of one-shot solution. So our systems we're developing, you can place an object within this device. It will create a 3D model it also then has accurate measured material maps. And this is like diffuse, specular, roughness, transparency, and so forth. And then we have a semantic AI that's then able to take this huge file and retopologize it into many LODs, levels of detail, so that you can have this on the cloud, and then you can download it ready for an AR app, VR app, or even for things like feature films or advertisement purposes.
Amy, can I mention a few as well?
Yeah,
So
please.
in the realm of taking photographs and having a scalable way of digitizing those for faithful representation. There's a company in LA called Ventana, VNTANA. They started out doing holographic displays, very high-end stuff for trade shows. Now they've taken a lot of machine learning tech and turned that into a platform where they can deliver product representations on web and on mobile. So they're doing some exciting work there. And so that whole set of techniques of taking photos and taking scans is one way to do it. Hand modeling, Elliot already mentioned. There's also, the hand modeling thing has an interesting twist, which is if you look at some of these model sharing sites like CG Trader, they've actually created a whole ecosystem where you can go out and effectively put this out to bid to their creators so that you can at least bring the cost of that hand creation down. So there's an entire content creation community that CG Trader has at its disposal. There are legion techniques for creating these assets. We cover several of them in the blog site. I can post that in the Q&A later, the URL, so people can go look later. I think some of the more exciting ones are the capture ones that Elliot was mentioning, though it speaks to what Rafaela was asking about a little earlier about configurability, right? That gets interesting. So if you do capture one shoe, how do you make that shoe something that you can then configure options on? You get any good answers for that right now, Elliot?
Yeah, that is a part of our roadmap. So with the Mulberry one that you saw and the little kind of tracking device, with that one you could actually change the color of the handle and the color of the bag and swap those in and out. But further on down our roadmap, we're looking at a thing called procedural scanning, and what that allows us to do is compartmentalize parts of an object so that they can either be swapped out, replaced, or animated. So if you're doing like a game in Unity, for example, and you want to scan a table, and you want to have a variety of those tables, you don't have to remodel loads of them or scan loads of them. It understands that every 2 foot there's a post, so you can have a variety on the fly.
Yeah, it could be very much a matter of having libraries of assets that you can add and remove, or different ways of doing it, depending on what the asset is or what you're trying to show. But it's what everybody is trying to figure out.
So we have another question from Veronica Perez, who wanted to know what weaknesses we think we need to solve in order for consumers to feel AR in retail not only attractive, but also useful. I think she's saying that she thinks that consumers feel AR is entertaining, but just not really, don't really trust it or not really sure of it yet. What are some of the things that are going to be benchmarks for it to be a seamless experience?
Well, I think what we were talking about, being able to try on something, being able to configure something, being able to make it your own. If you can do that, people obviously flock to it because they do want to be able to do it. It's either you have to be in that specific location, that store, and then even then you might not have what you're looking for. You might not be able to modify it. It's simple things like that I think will change things dramatically. There is to say that right now doing things on a phone is a little bit limiting. The screen is small, you have to hold things up, and you cannot really experience them exactly as you might want to. Certainly VR does allow you to do it perfectly if you want to do it that way, but I think also devices, being able to do these things in different types of devices that are a little bit more familiar or easy will greatly change things.
Okay, and
I think,
sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I think part of it will be an increase in consumer confidence as people just hear more stories from the bigger retailers we're hearing now. I mean, there's a thesis, from folks like Wayfair, Houzz, Shopify, who provide this to a bunch of their partners, that this technology for the retailer is going to, boost sales. But on the consumer side, it's going to decrease returns. Like if it really does that, if returns are really decreased, we've got satisfied customers who trust this technology. We don't have enough data yet to rely on this industry wide. We're having the early experiments. We're hearing the theses, And we're hearing some of the folks like Shopify start to share some of that information. But it's still at the vision stage, and we have to prove it out over the next few years. But I think that will go a long way. There may also be sort of generational aspects to this in terms of people's comfort with using these new technologies. So I just think there's an evolution that has to happen, and just more time out there. So, I don't think these are technical limitations. I think they're mostly sort of cultural and educational.
Yeah, and I don't think that we are going to be force-feeding AR to anyone. I think it will come natural, and they won't even think that it's AR. The same way that you're using a lens right now, and you don't think, hey, this is an AR lens or whatever. And so I think we will start adding pieces of functionality that are AR based or VR based, XR based, let's just say, and it will become so the norm that is just also what you do and how you do it. From a consumer perspective, we will talk about it in a different way, but I don't think they will.
So actually a good question from Steve Myers. Does anyone have any data on how 3D assets can reduce returns in e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was alluding to, and I don't know if anyone's ready to share these yet. That's a key thesis, and we'd have to go back to our friends at any of those companies I mentioned to see what they are willing to share in terms of case studies to date. So I think we need to put a pin in that, but there may be some readily available information as we speak. It may have already been published, and just we're not on top of it right now. So give us a time to follow up on that and reach back to those folks and ask, or any of the people that are in our sphere of influence are already engaged in doing this for customers.
Great. And Dan and Alex, if you're able, I don't know if you're able to save some of these questions, but maybe we might be able to find a way to answer them for people, because we unfortunately don't have time to get to all of them. We'll take another one from Roz McNulty, which I think is interesting because it's very specific to the industry. She said, is there an awareness of apparel industry software such as Browseware or Clo for creating product? And are there going to be, I'm assuming, she wants to know if there's going to be optimizations for kind of moving these into either AR, XR, have plugins that allow for creating and working in these existing, and I'm guessing ubiquitous software.
Well, the apparel industry is definitely using CAD software now to produce garments. That's been happening over the last few years. I was just at a conference called PI Apparel and been there before. Clothing is hard to represent for marketing purposes right now for a bunch of technical reasons, fabric, wrinkles, a bunch, and trying it on a different body types. There's a bunch of issues technically with the marketing side of this, but on production, it's, as far as I understand, and Raphael or Elliot, if you've got some more awareness on this, there's a lot of use of sort of CAD packages and the product lifestyle management software upstream, in the production side of retail clothing.
We've used Marvelous Designer quite a bit in the past to do cloth simulations, and it gives pretty accurate results, but the 3D files are pretty heavy, and they're not something you can really stream as of yet. But we have been doing recently some experiments with real-time cloth in Unity, and that is something which we think is kind of getting there. We've done some things like jumpers and sweaters and coats, but I think anything a little bit more complicated, I think we need to the compute power is not quite there yet.
There's one other interesting, fun thing. Sorry, Raphael, let me just jump in with it. This is total sidebar, but one of the things that will help drive this from the Unity side, in addition to those things that you're kind of looking at now, Elliot, is that the film industry is also looking at stuff like this. When it comes to hair, fur, that being able to do that in real time in engine, cloth on clothing. So there'll be multiple drivers. There's high-end games, there's films using real-time engines, and Unity has a practice there, as well as the stuff going on that's hardcore more on the apparel side. So we may see a convergence of those kind of techniques and needs over the next few years. Sorry, go ahead, Raphael.
Oh no, just a general statement. I mean, let's not forget that, if you think just about the consumer and what you're doing for the end consumer, XR has popped up recently, but from a production standpoint, when you're looking at companies, so designing, producing, testing, it's been going on for years. It's not new. Using of virtual models, of 3D models, importing of that, sharing them. It's been going on for many years. I know P&G, for example, a client of ours, we've been working for them for I think 5 or 6 years on just that globally. So it's not new in that sense.
Great. So we have just a few more minutes left. So I'd like to, just let you guys sort of move to the fantastical future, project us, a decade in the future, and this technology is ubiquitous. Can you just give us, I don't know, a little snapshot of your vision or your desires for just what these digital experiences look like? Tony, why don't you start?
I see it, I like it, I want it, or something like it. Give me all the options for doing that, all at my fingertips. Then, of course, 2-hour fulfillment. As Amazon was saying just before we all went into crisis mode, it was going from 2 day to next day to same day to 2 hours. And yeah, maybe it's with glasses like Rafaela said, but whatever the device I'm doing that with, it is just from discovery to intent to exploration to purchase on the spot.
Great. Elliot?
I think with shopping in the real world and shopping on the internet, they've both got their pros and cons, and we'll kind of pick which one we want to do for those reasons. I think what augmented reality and XR in general is going to start doing is actually bridging the gap and taking the best of both worlds. And I think what that's going to enable is things like virtual assistants that either can be in your own space, if you're doing it at home, or if you're in a store, which is going to allow you to buy products that you actually want, as opposed to products that you maybe think you want, where it could be a case of it understands your style and it suggests products that you want to purchase that will look good with what you also have. I think the benefit of that, especially in the future, is the fact it's going to hopefully help reduce waste, because at the moment you've got a lot of products that people purchase and they either don't return it because it's not what they wanted, or they realize that it doesn't really go with anything they own. So if we're able to use AR and machine learning to kind of bridge this gap, then you're still going to be purchasing as much product, but you're going to be keeping a lot more of that product and reducing that impact on the environment.
Great. Rafaela?
I would say glasses based of some kind, individualized spatial world. So everything will be around you, will be individualized based on preferences or actions that you might have taken before. Great integration of AR, artificial intelligence, and even based on where you're looking, I think it will be a different world for each person of us, and we'll be able to interact with experiences and products and things directly as we move around in that sense.
I think that's great. I think we got some incredible insights from the three of you. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions today, but if we're somehow able to save all of these, we'll come up with a clever way of getting them answered. And the recording of this should be available in a couple of weeks. But I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, but I'd really like to thank, Dan Berger and Alex Chuang for putting this together, and James for hosting, but of course, incredible panelists, Rafaela, Elliot, and Tony. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it back to James now to close us out.
That's great. I'm really inspired by some of the things that we heard today, and actually can't wait to get some of the team focused on how we can apply some of these technologies. So thanks again, amazing panel. Thank you to Dan and Alex for organizing. Thank you to our partners, Accenture Interactive, for helping put this on, to Shape Immersive, and to the Vancouver VR AR Association for providing all of the resources to make this happen. We will have a recording available sometime in the next few weeks, and the second episode will be scheduled shortly. So the moment that we have that locked in, everybody will get an invite, and we hope to see you there again soon. So everybody, have a great Friday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hey guys, thank you so much.
Very much.
Thanks, everyone.